Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. I know this because I just finished reading Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. This is one of the only adult fiction books that I've read in quite a while, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I bought this book when it first came out in circa, I don't know, like October time. It was autumn, and to be honest, it went onto my bookshelf and never got picked up because the front cover just did not inspire me. However, last week I got a phone call from my dad, and his friend had recommended that his daughters, as in my dad's daughters, read this book because of how amazing it is. And I thought, okay, I'm up for the challenge, I may as well pick it up and finally start it. And I'm so glad that I did. It is such a scrumptiously awkward but interesting and twisty-turny book that honestly, it's just phenomenal. I'm going to do a little bit of a non-spoiler bit at the start to sort of lay the scene, and then I will let you know, and I'm going to go into some spoilers to just talk to you about how much I love this book. Before I go into that, I just want to say I am 100% recommending this book to anybody, not just women, anybody who likes oddballs, okay? People who are a little bit against the norm, a little bit against the curb, a little bit pernickety and old-fashioned, and just love scrumptious language. If you like scrumptious, intricately bendy language, you will love this book. So, to kick things off, Eleanor Oliphant is the lead in Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. I'm gonna stop saying that, I'm gonna just call her Eleanor, okay? Eleanor from now on. So, she's our lead character, and she is quite a lonely woman. She is probably the epitome of what you would call a lonely cat lady, I guess. Her life is 100% routine, which is where I kind of found similarities with her. You're not supposed to find lots of similarities between yourself and Eleanor. She's supposed to be quite an annoying character, quite awkward, quite difficult, but yeah, I saw quite a few similarities, unfortunately. So routine, everything in Eleanor's life is routine. She does the same thing every weeknight, every weekend, and she loves pasta and pesto. This was far too similar to my life for my liking, but yeah. So Eleanor lives this quite lonely, solitary life, but she does go to work. She goes to the same job every day that she's been at for circa 8 years. She does the same job. She doesn't really have any friends. You feel quite sorry for Eleanor, but at the same time, as you get to know her within the first few chapters, you feel sorry for her, but at the same time, you have this little bit of frustration and resentment for her because she is just so difficult. And not because she wants to be difficult, just because this is the way she's been taught to think. So, for example, she goes into the kitchens at work and all of her colleagues are making tea. Quite normal. She brings her own mug and her own spoon, and you hear in her inner monologue, she's going, oh, I just don't understand how people could possibly drink from mugs that have been drunk from only 2 hours earlier by another human being, with the sloppy washing up of a quick rinse and pour out into the sink, and then they're drinking from them and sharing their germs, and the spoon which has just been placed on the draining board and then reused in another cup of tea which some other person who you do not know very well has used very recently. And she's just internalizing everything and talking about how bizarre she finds her colleagues. And to be fair, you kind of get the idea that her colleagues are thinking the same thing. They're laughing at her behind her back, you know, it's awful, but just the way she thinks is so... I'm not even doing it justice. I should have found an excerpt before I filmed this. I didn't. It's just so... Okay, so I just opened the book on a random page and I found a really good example of how just... I can't find another word to describe how scrumptious the writing is about Eleanor, so I'm just going to read you this little excerpt. It is from the start of chapter 6. It is not a spoiler, so do not fear. I had barely had time to get home and divest myself of my outer garments when the doorbell rang 10 minutes earlier than I'd been expecting. Probably trying to catch me out. When I opened it, slowly keeping the chain on, it wasn't the person I'd been expecting. Whoever it was, she wasn't smiling. Eleanor Oliphant? June Mullen, social worker, she said, stepping forward, her progress blocked by the door. I was expecting Heather, I said, peering around. Heather's off sick, I'm afraid. We've no idea when she'll be back. I've taken over her cases. asked to see some form of official identification. I mean, you can't be too careful. She gave a tiny sigh and began to look in her bag. She was tall, carefully dressed in a black trouser suit and white shirt. As she bent her head, I noticed the white stripe of scalp at the parting of the shiny dark bob. Eventually, she looked up and thrust out a security pass with a huge council logo and a tiny photo. I scrutinised it carefully, looked from the photograph to her face and back again several times. It wasn't a flattering shot, but I didn't hold that against her. I'm not particularly photogenic myself. In real life, she was about my age, with smooth, unlined skin and a slash of red lipstick. "You don't look like a social worker," I said. She stared at me but said nothing. "Not again. In every walk of life I encounter people with underdeveloped social skills with alarming frequency. Why is it that client-facing jobs hold such a lure for misanthropes? It's a conundrum." I made a mental note to return to the topic later, unhooked the chain and invited her in. So, as you can see, Eleanor she doesn't understand other people, and she often thinks, for example, when people are very awkward when they speak to her, she thinks that it is something that they're doing, and she just happens to run into all these awkward people constantly. Actually, we, as the reader, understand that it is just totally her. Anyway, so the whole book is like this unravelling of Eleanor's mental state, pretty much, and there comes a crux point, and then there is obviously the road to how it progresses after this point. The whole book is very much an Eleanor inner monologue, and it's kind of perfect for that. I saw a few reviews on Goodreads that they found her so frustrating because of the way that she thinks and speaks that they had to stop reading after a couple of pages or a couple of chapters. And it frustrated me because I thought, how do you not get that that's the whole point, is that Eleanor is slightly frustrating, slightly, why are you so awkward, so different, so wrong? And it takes until very close to the end of the book, about 80% of the way through, for you to finally get those answers, but you have to stick with it to find out why she is the way that she is. Time for the spoilers, guys. And yeah, I'm just gonna go ahead with the spoilers, so turn off now if you haven't read the book. So, let's kick this off with Raymond and Eleanor. So, I initially really hated this part of the story, the fact that Eleanor was having this awkward sort of like to and fro between a colleague at work. Obviously they were going to turn around and fall in love. I mean, that's what you kind of think when it starts off. You're like, okay, this is the introduction of the love interest. Alright, fine. But it grew on me so much. The fact that Gail never actually made Eleanor and Raymond fall in love was so unexpected but really satisfying, because there was no need. This book is so good without that additional love interest part. It's so, you could just do an extra 100 pages on the inner monologue of Eleanor. That's how good it is. There's no need for that. So I love that Gail didn't feel she had to suddenly bring in this big romance between Eleanor and Raymond, because it wouldn't have made sense for the character of Eleanor. I really enjoyed that. Also, like, moving forwards, when we see the fact that Raymond goes off with another woman-ish and they don't get together, they're, you know, just sort of together, I love the fact that because Eleanor doesn't really understand these relationships, she doesn't understand these sort of side themes that are going on in the book, the reader is left to really discover or make up their own mind about what is happening, you know, of what is happening between Raymond and, I think it's Laura, I can't remember her name, the shiny one. I love that we're given the choice to decide what we think is happening. Do we think that actually Raymond never really liked her and he was just getting harassed by Laura to go for drinks and he just felt he should? Do we feel that maybe Raymond was just being a bit of a player and seeing what he could get because she was so shiny and pretty? Like, we can make our own minds up on that, and I really liked that. It wasn't prescriptive at all. The twists, however, so the twist of Eleanor having a sister and her mum being dead, so I guessed them from, we're talking like pre-chapter 8, like we weren't even halfway through the book and I'd already guessed that Eleanor's mum wasn't really alive and Eleanor had a sister. And I'm not sure if you were supposed to. I would love to know, if you read this book, comment below on whether you guessed it really early too, because I kind of didn't feel like the book was ruined for me because of that, you know? I didn't feel like I'd suddenly lost this big exciting reveal that I should have got at the end of the book. I just felt like I knew that was going to happen, and I was slightly happy with myself when it did happen, and I worked out that I was right all along. Because that wasn't the main theme of the book for me. That wasn't the main, like, ta-da! The main theme of the book was Eleanor, and how Eleanor's inner monologue and her mental state, how that evolves through the book. It wasn't anything to do with her mum and her sister and the big reveal of how this trauma happened to her. That wasn't, in my mind, that wasn't the point of the book. And I don't think it should necessarily ruin it for you if you guess it super early, because it really didn't ruin it for me. But I'd like to know if you guys thought that, if you think something completely different to me, who knows? I mean, it's a funny one. I didn't really think through this review at all, so I'm finding that I'm 13 minutes into talking to myself, and I'm a little unsure of what to say, because my main love for this book, and the reason that I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, is just the character building. There is no other character that I've read in the last maybe 2-3 years that I have loved as much as I've loved Eleanor Oliphant. She was just perfect for me, perfectly scrumptious, and enough depth and enough that was unsaid, while at the same time being said, that you could just mull over her for the whole day while you were at work when you weren't able to read the book. It really had another layer to it, which you could say is because I usually just read YA fiction, and so this obviously had a bit more depth because it was more adult fiction. Yes, I understand that could be the case. However, I don't think it is. I think this was just an incredibly well written and thought out book that I would recommend to pretty much anybody, and I will probably be recommending to pretty much everybody for many weeks to come. I don't have anything much more to say, actually. I don't want to go on too much. I just think this book was phenomenal, and not even the book, just the way it was written. I would love to read anything more by Gail Honeyman, actually, following this. And really, I've never been interested in reading fan fiction before. I kind of really want someone to write Eleanor Oliphant fan fiction. I would love that. Like, love it. I really just want to know more about Eleanor. I kind of just want to be her friend. Anyway, hope you enjoyed my review, guys. If you did, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down and let me know why. And maybe subscribe, maybe don't. Either way, I will see you in a couple of days.